Hi, Craig Urquhart here, and welcome again to another Berlin Conversations. Today I'm honored and thrilled to have my neighbor, Kimberly Marteau Emerson, who is a civic leader, a human rights advocate and activist, and just one of the most energetic and amazing people I know. So welcome, Kimberly. It's so great to have you here.
It's great to be here.
And we're kind of a Berlin story. I mean, you ended up here, and I did too, because you came here as with your husband, who was the American ambassador, John
Right.
Emerson.
Mm-hmm.
But you have a whole life besides being the wife of John Emerson, and that's what's so attractive about having you here. So you on the board of directors of the Human Rights Watch,
Correct.
right? You are very actively engaged in the Joe Biden campaign,
Correct.
etc. What are some of
You
the
wanna
other things? Yeah, let's hear some.
Talk about it for a minute.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me, Craig.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm
It's
thrilled.
so fun to see you and reconnect, and we're in the same Keats, which is also cool. I'm a lawyer, but I stopped practicing many years ago, and John and I both worked on the Clinton campaign and ended up in Washington, D.C. This was before we had children. And I was a senior political appointee in the Clinton administration. I was at actually the public diplomacy arm of the State Department. It wasn't part of state at the time, but it is now part of the State Department. Mm-hmm. It's an agency called the U.S. Information Agency, and it explains our policies overseas, and it also listens to what publics overseas are thinking about the U.S. and our politics, our values, our policies. Mm-hmm. It's about being on the balconies of power rather than in the corridors. It's about being in the public square with the people. That's what public diplomacy is about, and it's something that has informed my life all the way up till today, and how and why I felt in Berlin that was part of my job, was to kind of be a champion of public diplomacy for the United States. So in the meantime, after we came back from Washington and my kids were growing up, I got very involved with Human Rights Watch in Los Angeles. And ultimately, over the past 17 years, my engagement has deepened and deepened and deepened. And I have been on the global board of directors since 2012. So that's 8 years. And I got very involved in helping build the presence of Human Rights Watch in Germany. And I felt it was part of my job to help Germans understand the importance of, Germany is one of the most democratic countries that I know. Mm-hmm. But that human rights is a type of sector, public interest that is not represented, is not supported by organizations like mine, are not supported by the government. And the reason is we criticize governments, we make recommendations to governments, and in order to maintain our independence, we cannot receive any funding, not 1 cent or €1 from any government official, government agency, which was interesting because, of course, my husband was representing the United States and I'm his spouse, but I was not allowed to raise money or solicit money or give money while I was here in this job, but I was very much allowed to speak about the organization and represent it. And that's what I did. And I'm very proud of the work that Human Rights Watch does. It does work in about 100 countries. It has 550 staff who speak around 85 languages from 80 something nationalities, and we investigate human rights abuses. and we investigate ones that are very much on the front page of the news, like, the refugees, the refugee population, what's happening in Lesbos and the Moria camp.
Yeah.
Things that you hear about in the news on the front pages every day. The war in Syria, the war crimes being committed by, the Assad regime, with the complicity of Russia and the help of Russia. What's going on in Belarus and the protests with Lukashenko after what was a very suspicious election.
Well, I would say he stole the election.
Yeah, very complicated election. Yeah. And also, we work at the EU, and we're very much trying to bring a human rights lens to the policies that are being passed there. And we work in the capitals, and we have offices at the UN. And so for us, and we work very much in the United States, sometimes people outside of the United States accuse us of being an American government organization, including China. And we're not affiliated at all with the US government. We're very much an independent international organization that happens to be headquartered in the United States.
So were you, concerning the poor children coming into the United States and put in cages, is that something that you would...
Absolutely. We, the U.S. migration policy, let me just start by saying the way that Human Rights Watch works, we're not what I call a grassroots or retail organization. Our methodology is not to, get millions of people to sign petitions. We are very much a wholesale approach, which is we try to impact the grass tops. In other words, the lawmakers, the policymakers, the leaders of opposition groups. We go to them in order to have policies changed and filtered down to the grassroots. And so our feeling is, if you can get governments to do the right thing vis-a-vis their citizens, that they will end up having a much broader and greater impact. So, for example, in the United States, we go and do our research and our witnessing, and migration policy is one of our big topics along the border. And then we take that evidence, and the second part is we investigate first. The second part of our mission is to expose what we find strategically. And so every single issue we work on has a different strategy for how it gets exposed. But we have one of the largest social media followings of any NGO. I mean, I would say since January, we've had around 23 million social media hits, with our various researchers and advocates, and in newspapers, online, and with, we're on multiple platforms. We're cited about 180 times a day in traditional news, both paper and online. So we then, once we've kind of strategically exposed what we're doing with our reports, and we do about 100 reports a year, plus thousands of dispatches and press releases, and then of course the social media side, we then take the evidence that we found, which is extremely thoroughly researched, and we go to those policymakers and we advocate for change, and we say, and you need to change now because people's lives depend on it. The well-being of those who have no voice. And that's where, we find our power, is that we have a big megaphone, and we're able to persuade or push governments to do the right thing, but also not just governments. We do business in human rights. We push corporations to do the right thing. We push opposition leaders to do the right thing. We go to international bodies. We go to places like the IMF and the International Labor Organization I mentioned already the UN. We go to the EU. Where we see that there is leverage, we find ourselves. And our goal is to make the cost of human rights abuses higher than the benefit that those who are creating those abuses think they're getting. So I'm really proud to be associated with this organization, and every time I meet the advocates and the researchers and the people that even work in our support offices, I know where their hearts are. And I know that we all believe in the values of openness and pluralism and fairness and equality and justice. And it's an empowering moment to know that you're aligned with people.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, because in this day and age, we need advocates and we need voices.
Absolutely.
For the ones that don't have them.
Yes.
And it's such great work you're doing.
Thank you.
I'm just overwhelmed, and I just think, yes. I mean, when you and your husband were here in Berlin, you were so loved by the Berlin people in the German country. You were, and the work that you did with the German-American relations, which was so damaged when Mr. Trump came in. Mm-hmm. Do you see that improving at all at some point?
Well, I think that unfortunately, if Trump prevails in the election, I just see it getting worse. Mm-hmm. He has a very stark and different view of foreign policy than Joe Biden does. Mm-hmm. Trump's, America First is really America alone and America leaving the JCPOA, leaving COP21, leaving the International Nuclear Force Agreement, mm-hmm. pulling out of the agreement with the Peshmerga, and abandoning them, the list goes on. And if he gets reelected, unfortunately, I think there's a chance we could pull out of the World Trade Organization, mm-hmm. and NATO. His point of view about the world is, he doesn't trust or like multilateral institutions, and he thinks that America has much more bargaining power if it's alone, and it's the strongest, the biggest, the strongest nation in the room. Under Joe Biden, under Joe Biden, you're going to see a return to very much someone who believes in multilateral institutions and that the work they can achieve. And let me talk about a little bit why I think that's true. America is a country that is made up. All of us came over either as, with the exception of indigenous people, mm-hmm. all of us came over either as immigrants or in chains. And we are a country with, of people who come from somewhere else. Mm-hmm. So we are really at our best when we are reaching out and connecting with those who are someplace else. This is the story of America. America is a really unique idea. Most nations started as nations of people first. Think about China, think about mm-hmm. the Italians, think about the British, and then they formed a state. America formed a state first and then had to figure out who it is. And we're still trying to figure mm-hmm. that out. We aren't, it's an idea always in the making. But it is one of the most powerful ideas in history. And so we're a country that really has an opportunity always to be stronger when it is collaborative. And so that's the fabric of what America is about. So I think that under a Biden administration, I know under a Biden administration, that you're going to see that return to a country that wants to partner with countries that share our values. We will be so much stronger when we can face common challenges together.
No, I couldn't agree more.
Nuclear challenge, the climate crisis challenge, I would say techno-autocracies look a lot more attractive to the rest of the world when America's not in the play box. We've got to get in the sandbox with everybody. We've had amoral leadership. And that has rippled around the world that, hey, there's nobody home, holding a light up and leading the world in morally where it should be.
Do you think the damage can be repaired?
I do.
Okay,
I do believe.
Will you think that people will trust America again?
I think that, I would tell them to challenge us in that trust, but I would ask them to give us a chance. That if leadership changes in America, when leadership changes in America, on November 3rd, that I think you will immediately see, Joe Biden stand up and talk about the importance of the transatlantic relationship. Yeah. And you will see emissaries from the United States immediately visiting European capitals to reassure our allies that we are a country that shares their values. We want to share their values. Our Constitution is a Constitution that is completely mirrors the values, the openness, pluralism, tolerance, democracy, all the freedoms, freedom of expression, the right to vote, the freedom to travel that, are expressed over here. And those reassurances will come back. And then you will also see him standing up and giving a speech about the importance of NATO and the importance of reforming the WTO, but doing it with our allies, doing it with our partners.
I mean, we can only hope, but we already see the voting, and in America, and it's actually sad to see the lines that are 12 hours long. I mean, we're like a third world country, and these people are trying to suppress the vote because they don't want the American people to have a voice. And I hope we survive this election.
So it's interesting because it's really easy for me to be pessimistic or to be scared because there's a lot of dire voices out there who are saying, this is, our last opportunity before we become an autocracy. And I think it is important to recognize the hallmarks of that. I think we've seen them over the past 4 years, quite, a huge amount of that coming out of the administration, and a president who, really would prefer to continue as president without a vote. And it's a nasty inconvenience that we actually have this right as citizens of a republic. But I'm also quite hopeful. I think those 12-hour lines tell us something.
They tell us something.
And they're telling us that Americans absolutely realize that it is so important for them to exercise this right now. This is historic. They're getting the message. Not that there won't be places where the vote is suppressed, but if you look at how far ahead Joe Biden is in the polls, which is about 10 points, even in swing states, and you say, okay, a percentage of that will be rendered ineffective or won't be counted because there is some shenanigans going on, but maybe it's going to be 2% or 3%. If you look at a potential tightening a little bit, a couple of percentage points, he's still pretty far ahead. And even if you look at the early voting in Florida, I was just on a phone call with Larry Summers, the former Secretary of the Treasury, and a senior advisor to the Biden administration, and he was very optimistic. He said, if you look at what's happening in Florida right now, I think Biden has a 70% chance of winning Florida, And I think we're going to know, if he does win Florida, we will pretty much go to bed knowing that he will win, because Trump cannot win without Florida.
No.
And there's lots of early voting going on, and 15% of that is already in and very much pro-Biden. And part of that is because Biden is ahead with seniors about 20%. And actually, Trump won beat Hillary with seniors about 9 points. And in the last two polls I've read, Biden was winning 21 and 27 points among seniors. So in a place like Florida, that's impactful. So I would like to also try to be optimistic today and say that even though I know that people are very wary of polls after 2016, that the polls are hardening. I mean, Hillary, the floor fell out about 10 days before, but there was that, what I called the October surprise of the Comey letter. Oh. And it showed how soft her support was. Right, yeah. And she actually did extremely well in all of her debates. We're not having a second debate. We might have a third debate. As Larry said on the phone call today, I'm going to hold my breath those whole 90 minutes.
I just don't think the president should be given the platform to speak at all, personally. Yeah. But, and I think it's interesting that the paper in Mar-a-Lago today endorsed Biden.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, so that's incredible.
Was that the Palm Beach Daily or
whatever
something?
It is around there.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah,
one of those. Yeah, we know that area. It's
and it's quite Republican.
It's very
that area.
Republican.
Yeah. Now, there's a lot of Republicans. I don't know if you have looked at any of the ads by the Lincoln Project.
Every day.
Every day.
Yes.
They're brilliant.
Yes.
Yeah.
And now the Republican senator from Iowa came out today and just said it's a disaster. Trump has been a disaster. What's his name? Stasis?
I hadn't heard that yet. Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah. So.
Well, the hope is that, if Biden clearly wins on election night, then it won't go to the courts.
Oh, God.
This
I can't go through that.
Speedy confirmation of Amy Coney Barrett, which is a travesty, but probably it's an exercise in raw power. What can I say?
Yeah.
I mean, if the Democrats were in the same position and had done what the Republicans did in 2016, would they be doing what they're doing now? I honestly don't know. I think Democrats are not quite as bold in the exercise of raw power as the Republicans are.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, in this day and age, it really seems to be hurting us. And I come from the world of don't lower yourself to their level. Just try to create a fairer playing field. And I don't know the answers to that yet. There are obviously some options out there with respect to the Supreme Court that have been bandied about. We shall see.
We shall see.
We shall see. But, I worry very much about our civil rights and the ones that have been guaranteed by past Supreme Court decisions being impacted by this newer, more conservative court, which looks like it will happen.
Oh, I'm very concerned.
Yeah. And I really wish that, Amy Coney Barrett, who, said how much she respected Ruth Bader Ginsburg and what a leader she was, would have had the decency to say it would actually not be right for me to be confirmed to the Supreme Court before we know who's president, especially since people are already voting. And I will be confirmed. She will be confirmed 10 days before the election. So that to me is probably the worst thing that's happening right now.
I couldn't agree more.
Really, really disturbing. But be that as it may, we will fight and we will try to we will hopefully win this election and go from there.
Your faith gives me optimism.
Well, I hope so. I hope so.
Because I'm so scared about everything, and I believe in Joe Biden. I think he's done a terrific job.
He's a unifier.
Yeah.
He's a decent man. He's a unifier. Mm-hmm. He's someone who will take the temperature down tremendously in the United States. I think we'll still be polarized. We'll still have problems as a country. We still have a lot of problems to solve, but I think that he will calm the environment tremendously if he is president.
And I think he'll bring intelligent people into his administration.
Yes, and I am super proud of Kamala Harris as his vice president. I've known Kamala since 2010. Mm-hmm. I was on her finance committee when she was running for attorney general. When she announced for president in January of 2019, I texted her that day and said, I'm in. John then also ended up joining me and supporting her, and we supported her until she dropped out in December, and we then joined the Biden campaign. But we've known Joe a long time and
of course
believe in him tremendously. But so for me, it was kind of like there couldn't have been two other candidates who I thought would be a better team or pair than Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And I think we've seen that in the way that they've campaigned together. And I thought that Kamala had a fantastic debate, and really
she was
proud.
Amazing. And she really affected me when she gave the speech in front of the Senate when they were trying to outlaw lynching in the United States.
Yes.
And she made that speech to Senator Paul of Kentucky.
Yes.
She brought me to tears.
Yes.
It was so moving. And
at a time when our country is trying to take its next steps in the face of finally, it seems like, a rising tide of recognition around knowing that our country has had a history of racism in many sectors. People like to say systemic racism. I can't disagree with that. To be represented in the White House on a daily basis by a Black American vice president would be extraordinary, and I think would go a long way towards providing confidence that our country will take the right steps to heal what I and John always have called America's original sin.
It is.
And so, so I have to stay very hopeful that while the pendulum swung wildly after the presidency, my president, Barack Obama, that we served here under so proudly, we have seen and understood the damage that has been caused during this past 4 years by this amoral president, and that we will return to a much saner world in the coming months.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I really do.
Sorry, I ended up saying a lot more about the elections.
That's just fine.
Yeah. But I wanted to just also go back on the German-American relationship and just say that in addition to the fact that I think, we will have a government that will help bring us back, that I always, say to Germans, look, the government isn't the people. Actually, Americans very much, the foundations of America, very much mirror those, of where Germany is now as a democratic, pluralistic, tolerant society. But also that 60 million Americans claim German heritage.
Right.
And that's 1/5 to 1/6 of our population. And when I first got here, I remember looking around and saying, and when I was meeting Germans, thinking, wow, they remind me of Midwesterners. And when you think about the history of Germans in America, there were 4 million Germans who came to America in waves from about the middle of the 19th century all the way through the early 20th century. And
My
in fact,
great-grandparents.
my great-grandfather
Yeah, okay.
came from Hessen. He was from a town called Reiskirchen, and went through Bremerhaven and got off the boat in New York. And by then, New York in the middle of the, kind of the second half of the 19th century was really getting built up and crowded towards the end of that century. And so when German immigrants were coming, a lot of them jumped off and immediately moved on and kind of took trains to wherever those train lines ended. And many places, of the many places, the Midwest became a solidly German stronghold. My great-grandfather ended up in Minnesota. Where did yours end up?
Michigan.
In Michigan. And then there they built communities, right? There they established the worlds that they lived in. And so when I saw Germans and I said, wow, they remind me of Midwesterners, actually Midwesterners remind me of Germans, that kind of down-to-earth frankness, tell it like it is.
Sense of responsibility.
Citizen responsibility.
And community.
Yeah, and community. And they built really strong civil society there. They built their own schools. They built their own businesses. They built their own, healthcare and social services, institutions. So there is that bridge that really always will exist. And so it's one of the largest diasporas in the United States. So, I point to that. And I also say, look, there's this history that America has with Germany in the 20th century that, while the German population is aging and the American population that remembers those hallmarks is aging, it is still, it still exists, especially reunification and the tearing down of the wall. It's the younger generations that don't really know that relationship, but they do know American culture, and they still admire American culture, and they admire our innovation. They look at Silicon Valley. They look at they listen to our music still. There's still that connection for them. So I think you've got, the history and you've got culture that very much wash over onto the German shores and will help us repair that relationship once we
have Joe Biden as
president.
Yes. So after your husband was ambassador, you got an apartment just down the street here.
That's
so
true.
Why did you love Berlin so much that you wanted to stay here? Or
Yes, of course.
Yeah, I mean, you're so established in Los Angeles, right?
Well, this is a little bit a part of. Maybe I can talk a little bit.
Well, you're working on a project, right?
Yes,
so
I'm writing an inspirational memoir about the time we were here for 3.5 years officially here, and it's about building your identity as the spouse of a powerful person, and it's framed.
Is that about John? Talking about being.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Great, that's funny.
Yeah.
No. This was, when I got on the plane in Los Angeles in August 2013, I was Kimberly Marteau Emerson. And when I got off the plane here, inside I was still Kimberly Marteau Emerson. But, to the world here, I was the Ehefrau. I was the, I was the Mrs. I was Mrs. Emerson. And then, I kind of garnered a nickname. They called me the Ambassadorable over time. But, I honestly, even in my ambassadorial training seminar, was told, you don't have any direct authority. You only have derived authority. You can't ask anybody to do anything for you at the embassy. Only your husband can. You can never drive in the secure vehicle by yourself. And so I hired my own assistant. I hired my own driver. Obviously, the house staff was, again, my husband had to sign all the approvals. Of course, I worked closely with them on things. But you get a real sense that, you're not in charge at all. You're there. And even in this training seminar, when they did the spouse seminar, they told us, you can come up with some great crafts projects. You'll be hosting. And, here I am, a human rights advocate. I sit on the Council on Foreign Relations. I was a senior appointee in the Clinton administration. I'm a lawyer. I have a master's degree in French private law. I speak, fluently another language, not German. Please don't ask me to speak German. Mein Deutsch ist sehr schlecht. I learned a few good phrases. I used to toast all the time saying, ich möchte mein Glas erheben und auf unsere Freundschaft trinken.
Oh, das
Super.
ist wunderbar.
Yeah, wunderbar, right?
Genau.
That got me a long way.
Yeah.
But the fact is, and I really give an enormous tribute to my husband who supported me internally in the embassy, and just basically also when I ran off to do my own independent projects, was like, go for it, like whatever you want to do. And so this book is framed around the qualities you have to find in yourself that you have to deploy and strengthen in order to be successful in finding that identity. But it's very anecdotal, and I focus on different platforms where I was deploying those qualities. So just a couple of examples that I like to talk about. One of them, which continues till today, and that is in the world of art. I've always loved art. It's always been in my life, but I wouldn't call myself an art expert. I wouldn't say I'm a collector. I didn't sit on any art boards. But when I got to Germany, I met a couple of people who were very much in the art world. Both of them were collectors. One was also a consultant. And I was very curious. And I turned to them, and Curiosity is the title of one of the chapters. And I said, teach me. I want to know. Why is Berlin considered this great center for contemporary art, that all these artists want to live here? What is that about? Share with me. And they became my guides in the art world here. And that was just the beginning. And then after them, there were more friends. And through them, I met other people. And I met gallerists, and I met artists, and I went to art studios, and I went to Documenta, and I went to the Venice Biennale, and I participated in every Berlin Art Week. And I also opened a show at the Residence. That is part of being an ambassador, is you have there's a program at the State Department. I think it's actually one of the most interesting things that ambassadors can do. It's called the Arts and Embassies Program. And through it, you get to curate a show at your residence. Wow. And so mine was A Tale of Two Cities, and it was contemporary Berlin and LA artists. Now, LA happens to be a sister city of Berlin, so we're from Los Angeles. So it was the perfect, what I felt like was the perfect duality of having artists who were looking at their cities, kind of creating their art through their perspective of the cities they were living in now. And so, and how the cities were both parallel and different, and in these kind of crazy urban environments. And so, for example, a really interesting contemporary artist in Los Angeles is Mark Bradford, very famous contemporary artist, a Black American, who a lot of his, especially earlier pieces, but even up to now, were about the social justice issues, the problems underlying living in South Los Angeles, and that's where his studio is. He's also very, very socially justice minded and has a program in Leimert Park in South Los Angeles for foster youth that teaches them about art and the art world. And he has artists in residence there. It's called Art and Practice. And he and his partner, I think Alan's his partner, maybe his husband, support and developed this art and practice. And he lives it. But his art is very challenging art. And actually, he lent us a piece out of his personal collection that was kind of our star piece in the dining room over the fireplace about the Second Amendment and the right to bear arms. And when we first hung it, I said, and it's a collage, and you can kind of see the words of the amendment there, but it's like under layers of newspaper and magazine and paint and all that he uses in his art. It's a beautiful piece. It looks very abstract, but you can see the words of the amendment there, and it was upside down. We didn't hang it upside down. He purposefully created it upside down as a message. And so I had pieces throughout the residence that were that spoke about issues, crime and justice and equality and racism and also beauty and wealth and changing populations and what was really interesting in curating the show. That you had I found that American artists in Los Angeles were much more kind of on the nose within the boundaries of the curated idea, and that the ones based in Berlin, it was much more intellectual, and so it was an experience in curating where you kind of have to, the boundaries of your idea have to get a little soft in order to be able to accommodate all these artists. So we did this huge opening within, 8 months of coming here at the residence. And I did it with the director of the Whitney Museum, Adam Weinberg, who became a good friend after that, and his board. And it was like a coming out party in the art world. And ever since then, it's been my great honor and privilege to feel like I really am part of that world here. But it was through my curiosity that I got there. So that's like one chapter. But the book also touches on things like having resilience when, the challenges that we faced, whether it was a government shutdown and how that impacted us, or Handygate. If you remember, that happened right after we got here, where Merkel's cell phone was being listened to, and that we'd come in, we'd been so warmly welcomed, and 2 months later, boy, the temperature went up towards us, and there was a period of we had to do a lot of listening, and that's, by the way, what we'll do again if Joe Biden, when Joe Biden becomes president, is we'll listen to Germany, but. Creativity, gratitude, honesty, authenticity. There's so many. It's 18 chapters. I have 2 chapters to go. But the final chapter is about stepping into consciousness. I stepped into myself here.
I'm really looking forward to.
Well, I hope it turns out as good as I think the idea is. We'll see. I have a lot of editing left to do.
Well,
I'm excited to
I actually like to think of you down the street working on your book.
Yeah, thank you. I've really been productive in that space. I was here during the shutdown for 2 months. I started the book 2.5 years ago in Nicaragua, of all places, by myself, but I needed to get away. And at that time, it felt pretty close, and I wanted to go somewhere where I wouldn't be distracted. right? I felt like if I came back to Berlin, I might be distracted. So I started off by going someplace I'd never been and staying at this amazing lodge and near Granada. And it was a good start. It was a really good start. But I really, at that moment, because I'm a first-time author, I wasn't really sure I could write. And then, of course, because my life is so busy, I'm on all these boards. I'm involved transatlantically. I travel a lot. I have a busy household in Los Angeles.
Oh, yeah, you do. Two wonderful daughters.
And three wonderful daughters.
Three wonderful,
the twins who you got to know.
Twins I got
Taylor
to know,
and Haley, and then my older daughter, Jackie. And then whenever I was in Germany, I got asked to do a lot of things. And I was, again, on these boards that are here. So I felt like I had to just go someplace completely, not on the radar. And so that was a great place to kick it off. And then I have a friend who has a place up in the Sierras who says, just come up and let me go up there by myself. And that's great. That was only 3 hours away by car. And so that became a real writing retreat for me. But I always could go for a couple weeks at a time, 3 weeks at a time. Whenever I tried to write at home, it was very challenging.
Yeah.
I never got a ton done. And then Berlin became a real writing spot for me. And that was about a year and a half ago. I stayed 2 months in Berlin by myself writing. Probably I got 6 weeks of writing done. And it was so funny because when I was here during the shutdown, and people would say, oh my God, you're here by yourself without your husband, what is that like? And I said, well, I was here a year ago by myself for the same amount of time without my husband. Nobody asked me about it because their lives were normal. Now everybody thought, I just took advantage of the shutdown. It took a little courage to be here, not to return and be with my family in Los Angeles, but it actually ended up being quite a good thing for my creativity. And friends knew I was here by myself. All my friends in Germany, my friends, and they sent me things. They sent me food. They sent me clothes. They sent me masks. They sent me flowers. They sent me wine. These one friend sent me a case of wine, which I almost went through the entire time, I have to say, during shutdown. Yeah. Having a glass or two of wine every night was necessary. They sent me online images of art. I have a friend who's a curator who every day sent an incredible piece of art with an explanation of why it was relevant. And of course, funny videos. We all got those.
We all got those.
And we still get them.
Yeah, we do.
Which is great. And then I went home for 2.5 months.
Right. I remember when the photo of you on the airplane.
On the airplane. Yes. That was actually quite an experience. At that moment, there were maybe 14 flights a week, down from 440.
Yeah, I know. It's incredible.
But I had so many systems. I have so many systems here. I always feel very safe in Berlin. And so, one of the things is I really feel like it's my zweiten Heimat. It's, I have a huge circle of friends here, close friends, people that
I get
I'm
that.
committed to, and they're committed to me as a friend. And I think we all reach that point in our lives. We go, God, I don't need any more friends in my life. And honestly, I built this other tier of friendships here that are as important to me as my American friendships. And in some ways, some of them are closer. I've had some truly deep experiences I have with friends here. And I also know I have a great circle of doctors here. I have my former teams, my house team, house staff, and our security team are still friends. And we do reunions together whenever I'm here, and John comes here. So I felt it was really important. I came back over 2 months ago. I'm sadly going back to Los Angeles in 3 days.
Well, you should be in America for the election.
I definitely have to be in America for the election. I'm actually get home on the 19th, and a week later, I will be in Arizona as a poll watcher. Good. So I will be there until Election Day. To me, this is one of the most important and interesting pieces of being an American, is that we have the right and the ability to be volunteers to help make sure that our vote is executed properly and fairly, and that every American gets a right to vote who is at a voting age. And I did it. I started doing it, I think, I want to say 2004 was the first election that I went out into the field for. I mean, I did national advance for Michael Dukakis in 1988. So I was, moving around the country for a candidate from the beginning. That's when I met John, and then we, went to work, and he lost, and then we supported candidates all the way up through Barack Obama. But we, in 1992, he was campaign manager for Bill Clinton in California, and I did some work for him, and then we both ended up in Washington, John in the White House, me at the State Department, and then we supported, obviously, Democratic candidates all the way up through Barack Obama, and then, of course, came back here as appointees. But in 2004, I did election protection in Albuquerque, New Mexico, for John Kerry. That was a really weird day. I was at a school. I was doing election protection. It was really, really incredible experience doing that at a polling site. But what was weird about the day is when we got on the plane in the evening to fly back to California to be in LA for election night, Kerry was ahead. And when I landed back in LA, he was behind. And it was the strangest moment ever. It was kind of like, how could that have happened? But as we've seen now, since then, election nights can be very strange things in America. And then the next two election cycles, in 2008 and 2012, I was in Las Vegas. And I'm just going to tell one more anecdote about the amazingness of going out there and being a volunteer for an election. I was doing Get Out the Vote, GOTV we call it, in East Las Vegas, in the projects. I always go with a friend. We drove our own car, so we had a vehicle. Maybe we flew in and rented a car, it doesn't matter. Anyway, we are working in these one-story projects with very people that were living below the poverty line. A lot of older Americans, a lot of people of color, but also Caucasians too, white Americans as well. And I remember, and our goal was you go around and you try to, first of all, confirm they're going to get out and vote and that they're going to vote for your candidate. And you're dealing with people that sometimes have a lot of anger, have mental disability, have never voted before. It's a truly, truly important experience, especially I'm an elite. I'm an educated elite. I'm lucky to be. I grew up, I did not grow up as an elite. I grew up in very much a working middle class, lower middle class, working class family with a single mom. Really important to go back and be with Americans from every background. And in 2008, I was doing election protection in East Las Vegas in this one housing group. And there was a woman, a Black American, who was registered to vote. She showed us her card. I said, wow, have you voted? She said, I've never voted. And I said, why not? And she said, because I can't read. I can't read. And I said, but there are people at the polls who will help you read your ballot. And they're very confidential, and they'll help you vote. They will help you look at what the materials. I said, would you trust me and come with me, and I will take you to your polling place and give you this opportunity that you've had all your life and never, this right that you've had all your life and never exercised. And she said, yes, yeah, I will let you do that. And so I drove her to the polling place and handed her over out, escorted her in, handed it over to the people, and everybody was so nice. They took her inside, and I waited outside. And while I was waiting out there, up drove a vehicle, and out got a journalist and with their radio engineer from NPR. Mm-hmm. And National Public Radio, which is, one of the most important apolitical radio stations, in our country.
I'm so glad we have one here in
yes,
Berlin.
Right,
yes,
right.
Yes,
and
yeah.
at KCRW Berlin.
Yeah, right, yeah.
And shout out, because I'm on the advisory
board. I know you
board.
are.
Shout out to KCRW Berlin, which we love. Anyway, and they said, hey, and they saw me wearing my election gear and my vest and all of that, I'm like in my volunteer vest. And they said, we're looking for election day stories. Do you know of any good ones? And I said, I just might have one for you, but I need to see if the person is willing to talk to you. So when she came out, my voter came out, I said, how was it? And she said, we were just the two of us talking. I was kind of walking with her slowly back towards the car, and she said, it was the best day of my life. And I said, how do you feel? Would you be willing to talk to a journalist about it? Because there's a radio station here, and I know they'd like to talk to you if you're willing to talk to them. Right? How do you feel? And she said, I want to tell the whole world. And so I escorted her up, and I have to say, even every time I tell that story, I kind of get choked up, because to me it was like, this is what this is all about. This is what being an American is all about, and exercising your right to vote and having that opportunity.
And to be empowered.
And to be empowered. Yeah. And to be a citizen of a republic. We must never, never take that for granted as Americans.
I couldn't agree more. Well, Kimberly, thank you so very much for coming by and having this conversation.
Oh, it was a pleasure.
And you're such an inspiration.
Oh,
and you are. I mean, and I'm just very honored and thrilled to have you here and to have you as a neighbor.
Yes.
And to be able to call you a friend. So thank you so much for coming by.
Thank you very much for having me. It was truly a pleasure. And
when you get back from LA, hopefully we'll have a new president and we can go out and toast.
Yes.
How's that sound?
Yes, we can trade restaurants and bars in our Keats.
Sounds good. Yeah.
Thank you, Craig, for having me. It was really, I enjoyed it very much.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you so much.